Well, it is a Saturday edition of Orange and Blue Today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason talking about the Denver Broncos and doing what John Elway always said, Mase, win now and win from now on. This question comes from your question at the press conference on Thursday.
Balancing the needs of the short term with the needs of the long term. Because it's a pretty deep draft, especially as you get into day 2, second round, third round, fourth round. There are plenty of guys in that range who are going to help right away. You're going to see that around the league this year. But there are also plenty of high ceiling guys, longer runway guys. And just you take a look at the tight end position. We've talked about day 2 guys. In one basket, you have Elijah Arroyo, Harold Fanning Jr. In another basket, you have Mason Taylor, Terrence Ferguson, just to give 2 types of tight ends. Ferguson and Taylor, probably going to give you more early. Fannin and Arroyo, higher ceilings, can potentially be better players long term. But there's also more variance. They could be busts. I don't think Ferguson and Taylor are going to be busts, but they may not have quite the lofty ceilings of Arroyo and Fannin. Basically, there's a little more spread to the possibilities of Fannin and Arroyo. But Fannin and Arroyo are going to need more developmental time. I don't think they're going to be as good this year as Taylor and Ferguson. So what do you prioritize? What do you need more? We've talked about with defensive linemen as well. And the Broncos are in this spot where the right players might push them over the top.
It's a dangerous spot too, though, Mase, because let's break this down before we get more into the topic, because here's the thing. They're in the right spot where the right players can put them over the top. I'm not saying they're in purgatory, but if they take too much of the long approach, then you are in purgatory because you're just good enough. The right players will put you over the top. So it has to be a mix of the win now guys and the developmental guys.
Right. It's almost like if you were designing this, if they kept their day 2 picks, if they didn't trade up, if they stay at 20, or if they make a trade up, but it's kind of what you said earlier this week, making that trade up with a player rather than a pick. Your round 2 pick is maybe the guy who helps you this year, and your round 3 pick is the one who's got the lofty ceiling, but is more a developmental type player.
That's Deion Walker.
Yeah, Deion Walker, who you may be spending this year trying to mold, trying to figure out the proper use for him, trying to channel him a little bit. But boy, if you could figure out the right spots for him, the right versatile uses for him, a 315-pounder who could potentially give you some snaps on the edge in addition to going inside. Whew.
Perfection.
I mean, the thing about Deion Walker's versatility is that, and this is what kind of gets me as I watch him. Imagine Carl Mecklenburg plus 65, 70 pounds.
Ooh.
That's okay. Yeah. Is that a ceiling? Yes. But that's the vibes I get if you can polish him. And look, part of it is believing in your coaches, believing in what you have in the building, believing in your developmental plan. Broncos I think they have pretty good belief in that. So
they got some pretty good mentors there. Yeah. We're talking defensive line, but I want to pick your brain, Mase.
Yeah.
Is the impetus for this question? Your question was the second one out of the chute.
Yep.
And just the thought process in setting up the fellas, George Payton, Sean Payton, to be able to discuss this sort of topic. Where was your mind at thinking of hey, I want to know this answer? What were you curious about?
Curious about just weighing priorities. philosophically. And one of the things that put it in my mind was, well, I was thinking about Walter Nolan coming in for a 30 visit right there before the 30 deadline a few days back.
Huge upside.
Yeah, massive upside, but
not ready.
You might be spending that first year refining him. I mean, I think with Walter Nolan, if you drafted him at pick number 20, and certainly then you'd be punting running back to day 2, Nolan could be an absolute terror on the field in 2026. 2025, I think you'd be talking about rotational snaps and maybe working out some of the kinks, working out some of the mental errors, getting him up to speed. There'd be flashes with Walter Nolan as a rookie. You'd see glimpses that would tell you, oh, he's coming. But there'd probably be some moments where you might want to, rip the follicles out of your scalp.
Better have some patience there.
Yes. So actually, it was kind of, Walter Nolan, that type of prospect. If you picked him in round 1, that sort of put it in my mind because he's probably a guy who's a little longer runway type of prospect than some of the other players there. Now, do you have a first round grade on Walter Nolan? Because I do.
Yes, he is.
Mm-hmm. Despite that, because man, his ceiling is high. Like his ceiling's all pro.
Well, I don't mean to scare people, but his ceiling is Aaron Donald.
Yes, that's how good he is. He's a beast. You saw him down in Mobile.
He's a manimal.
He was wrecking people. He was wrecking drills.
There were Donald flashes. We saw Aaron Donald at the Senior Bowl. He's the best player I've seen in 20 years.
He's the best defensive lineman I've seen in Mobile since Donald. Yes. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, I don't throw that around lightly. And so that's what was going through my mind when probably it was Walter Nolan, 30 visit, fresh in my mind. That's why I asked George Payton about this.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a conversation about this. We were talking about some interior D linemen, and there's one that's ready to roll. We think, he's ready to play next year. And then there's another one that, man, you may hit on him. And I think it's important that, you go around the room, you talk to the assistant coaches, you talk to the scouts, and what's the vision for this player? Year 1, year 2, and beyond. And so you have a lot of those discussions. And then you dig into the mental, and the makeup of these players. And do they have the makeup, if they are raw, to take that next step, the work ethic to take that next step? And so you dig into all these, you get into the analytics, and they help you break a tie, a cluster. And so that's kind of how we go about it.
All right, I'm going to spitball here.
Okay.
What if the conversation is Derek Harmon versus Walter Nolan?
Harmon's the now guy.
Yeah. Derek Harmon's a now guy. Walter Nolan is the longer runway guy.
Well, I'll go with 2 of your favorites then. Is it Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan?
Ooh,
because Grant, and God bless Grant, and my evaluation is he's tough to move on the inside, but he doesn't have the get off of a Tyleik Williams, of a Walter Nolan, that type of defensive tackle that can be disruptive. Kenneth Grant's just really huge and tough to move. So that guy's ready now. Walter Nolan and his activity and his movement, it's something you've got to sharpen and take time with.
And I'll tell you, with the Broncos, if you put Grant out there now on first and second down, and your base defensive line was Grant, Jones, and Allen, I'd be saying that JFM becomes sub package, right? JFM, Allen, sub package. That your base defensive line is Grant, Jones, Allen, so you get those 2 big immobile and I don't mean immobile in that they can't crash the pocket. I mean immobile in that an opposing offensive line can't get anything done against them. All of a sudden, you can't run the ball.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, Dre Greenlaw and Alex Singleton have a lot of space to operate. So if it's Grant and Jones and they're working together, and Grant would step in, and I believe Grant would step in right away. All respect to JFM, Grant would step in right away and working your base.
Yeah, he's your run stuffer.
You would just get big. Grant, Jones, Allen would be your base 3 on most downs.
That's a lot of weight.
And then the other thing is also, if you wanted to give Jones a breather, then you go Grant. You keep everybody fresh. And then you're doing the Eagles thing also of you can come in waves as well. So think of it this way. You can go Grant and Jones together if you really want to just say, okay, you can't run on us. You can also, so basically, you can have them together, but you can also stagger it to where you're always making sure Grant or Jones are on the field first and second down.
That's awesome.
Every base package snap, you will have Grant or Jones on the field if you do that. And that's and given the issues the Broncos had in run defense last year, damn sure they're thinking about this, right? They have to think about this.
Yep. The way the season ended, you have to think about that, and you have to consider all options. They will be taking a defensive tackle, and it's that, Mase, of the player, but it's also of that pick. Are you going to take your first round pick on a player that maybe in 2 years is a starter? Or are you going to take your first round pick on a guy who's a starter today? You get Omarion Hampton, there's no doubt he is the lead running back.
Yeah.
Period. You get Kenneth Grant, you get Walter Nolan. Well, that's different.
Well, Grant might be a base package. Like I said, you might find a way to start him in your base package, but he's going to play some meaningful reps. Nolan may not be playing as many meaningful reps as Grant.
Right.
Harmon probably would. No one of those 3 is probably playing the fewest meaningful snaps immediately. Like you're probably saying, okay, third down rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the interesting discussion with if you drafted Nolan is what do you do? One of JFM or Zach Allen's not getting re-signed in that instance.
Where's Malcolm Roach fit in that?
Yeah.
As well. You got 3 guys on that D line. You're
really, again, I mean, you're coming at him in waves with run defenders. Like you're basically saying, try running on us. Good luck.
You better throw against PS2. Oh God, you can't do that either.
Yeah. Oh man. At that point, you're really telling Vance Joseph no excuses, right? Like you'd be giving him immovable objects up front. And then on the back end, the best cover corner in the NFL, and at this moment, the best defensive player in the NFL. And if you couldn't have an elite defense with that, man.
Jim Leonard could. So
you just threw like you.
Well, that's what we're looking at, right? It's a results-based business. This team's got a lot of talent, dude.
Oh man,
they got a lot of talent.
Well, actually, I'm going to plug one of my side hustles here. I'll have the Broncos preview section of the Lindy's Pro Football Magazine preview that you can, if you're going to the beach on your vacation, whatever, in June, you can read that. And one of my little things is going to be like on the hot seat. It's a little tough to do on the hot seat when you're coming. Yes, see, there you go. You got the draft preview.
Uh-huh.
I'll have the Broncos preview this summer, and one of the categories is on the hot seat. It's a little tough to do when you got a team coming off of 10-7 returning to playoffs. But my hot seat's Vance Joseph.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There was really nobody else, right?
Not really.
Yeah.
So VJ, go get it done.
If you give Vance Joseph somebody on the defensive line who can step in right away and help this run defense. And certainly now we know based on what George Payton says, they are having debates over interior defensive line prospects regarding who can help you now or who can help you for the long term. If they're having this debate and they draft the guy who can help them right now, whether it's day 1 or day 2, and I think, actually, this is another thing. I think no matter what happens with running back, come what may, Cease, I think they're getting an interior defensive lineman on day 1 or day 2. I think one's coming. And day 1 or day 2 means that guy's going to play.
Yep.
So they're adding to that area. They're doing the Eagles thing. They're going to, build on that. It's a good year to do it. They said over and over, they reiterated this on Thursday. It's a great year for defensive linemen in the draft. So go get another one. Go add to it. But yeah, no excuses, right?
Make it happen.
And it is something they think will help the team. Now, you and I have talked about, and that we had Bo Nix and Sean Payton as the opening slide. You and I have talked about how everything should be tailored to help Bo Nix, because helping Bo Nix does help the Broncos. So this was actually the first question from our friend Parker Gabriel at the Denver Post.
Love that guy.
Yes, he's actually,
he's broken bread with him.
Yeah, broken bread. He's been on this show and asked the question about how often does Bo Nix's name come up when they're talking about potential players to add in the draft. So here's Sean Payton's answer about that. This is actually what led off the Zoom press conference on Thursday. Take a listen.
When we talk about like painting picture for Bo, it's like painting the picture for quarterbacks. So, listen, we love that we're not in that same position a year ago with the selection of Bo, but I don't think in those meetings, we might call Bo in and ask about an Oregon player, but I think the simple answer to your question is, what's the vision for players we might add on offense or we might add on defense? When you help your defense, you help your quarterback as well. There's a lot of runners in this draft. It's certainly it's an opportunity, but they're different type runners. Some of them are physical downhill runners. Some of them are guys that can take, a misdirection, scissors type run and go the other direction with it. And so it just depends on what you're looking for. But we love Bo, but we're not talking about Bo in these meetings a lot. I mean, I just say that, I think it's really more of how do they add to what we do offensively.
Look at George's face when he talks about scissor runs and George's like, don't say anything, don't say anything, don't say anything.
Yeah. Misdirection, scissors type run.
That's the odd couple, man. I love them. What a combination, man.
Yeah. Well, there was that line at one point where Sean talked about how he accidentally drank from George's water bottle. He just grabbed it. I mean, that's familiar.
Oh, yeah.
Think of how far they've come. I mean, that first year, I thought, is this going to work?
Right.
Because they have two completely different philosophies. I mean, just talk about how they see the draft. George is more darts, trade down. Sean is trade up. We talked about it on the Thursday show. Sean wants to get out his driver and go for it. Sean, has a history of trading up in the first round like he did in New Orleans. And I feel like last year was sort of their split the difference and stay right there at 12 and hope that Bo Nix falls. And of course he did. And everything worked out and everyone was happy.
They played the game and they won, man. But they do it together. When Cody Rager was hired, I was like, uh-oh, George.
Yeah.
And he's responded, man.
We're going into year 5 for George Payton here. It's a 6-year contract.
Looking for a new deal pretty soon.
Yeah. That's actually interesting to look at with George Payton because remember, the 6-year contract, even for a general manager, that was long. but it was smart on his part.
Yes. Get past the ownership.
Yes.
And get you a chance at 2 quarterbacks.
Yes. It gave him a chance to make some mistakes. Now, the biggest thing was the ownership change. He was making sure that he was covered. So if something happened, because there was a very real chance as George Payton came in that the team would be sold to somebody who just simply would say, I want my own person. I mean, It's happened in Broncos history. Those of you, there's some of you I know that are longtime Bronco fans that remember the Orange Crush, which means you may remember when the team was sold from Gerald and Alan Phipps to Edgar Kaiser in 1981. And Edgar Kaiser very quickly fired Red Miller, fired Fred Gerke, just like that, gone. In Grady Alderman as GM, in Dan Reeves as head coach. Actually made those firings, I believe, in early March of 1981. So did it as like at an unusual time. But that's sometimes what happens when a new owner comes in. So George Payton, very wise to cover his own butt. Basically, all right, if there's a new owner, I want to make sure that something happens. I've still got the financial security coming out of this deal. You and I talked about on an earlier show, though, that turned out they were bought by the right people who gave George Payton a chance that looked past the Russell Wilson trade. The easy thing would have been to say, this trade isn't working out. Let's just move on. They didn't do that.
That would have been a move out of anger.
Yes. Instead saying, okay, how do we fix this? And actually realizing that the guy, like, okay, the trade was a mistake, but why was the mistake made? And does it really reflect philosophically what George Payton wants to do? George Payton is a draft and develop person. His strengths are scouting. Like, what does George Payton do best? Like, where does he flourish? Like, when you
see campus of Minnesota Mankato finding Adam Thielen,
or right? Like you see him on a Saturday in college football season, standing on a sideline somewhere. Like the Broncos are playing on a Sunday in New Jersey or Tampa or wherever. And on that Saturday, he's in Gainesville or College Park or Blacksburg or somewhere, right? Watching somebody with his eyes, or like on, Sunday they're in New Orleans and Saturdays in Oxford or Auburn or Tuscaloosa. Like that's it. That's what he does best. And he studies, gets out there and watches in person, gets his own eyes, puts together a good staff and leans on them. And the results are a roster that looks a heck of a lot better than it did when he got here.
Well, it's envy. If you talk about having a good front yard, right? Mm-hmm. Nice, clean grass.
Yeah.
People look at the Broncos roster and they have envy because of George Payton. So can they do both, Mase, as we wrap up today's program? Can they win now and win from now on?
Yeah. And I think this draft is going to be a mix of both. I think you'll see probably 2 or 3 players that we look at and say, they're helping you this year. And I think we'll see the rest that we look at and say, the vision is cultivate them and see where they are in 26 and 27. What you get from them this year is a bonus. It's about the future. I think it's a mix. And when I say like this year, for like 2 or 3 players for this year, that may well include, say, a punter that you add later on. they've looked at some punters. They've done some scouting on them. Now they may also take the route of waiting out the cuts this summer. But it also wouldn't surprise me if they bring somebody in immediately if the draft falls a certain way to take a punter there in the late rounds too. Darren Rizzi may get on the table and pound it for a guy.
We are fixing to find out. Hope everyone has a great Saturday out there. But Mase, before we're out of here, folks can always help us out on YouTube. How do they do that?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell
so that you
never miss a vid.
Boom. Air fist bump right there, buddy. Boom. We got it done. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mase Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned